everybody. Monthly community meeting. This is the talk of the town where we're talking about safety. So we're putting together a neighborhood safety program, and this will not happen without involvement from the residents, all the community stakeholders, businesses, developers, social service agencies, nonprofits, everyone. So we're starting this conversation by inviting some law enforcement agency representatives to share their perspective on what it is they do, and offering an opportunity for the folks in this room to continue on that conversation. So our agenda today includes, I hope everyone got some food. There's plenty of in the opening remarks now. We'll move into the panel. We'll move into the presentation, giving you an overview of the neighborhood safety program.
The second
And
annual
we'll go
Ohio City
into the
Open.
panel, and then
Love to
we'll
see
do
everybody
what's
out
called
there.
a
We have a
rotating
custom
Q&A.
made
So if you
course that we play on, you can win a variety of prizes. Food is included. We've got a couple local places that are going to be catering. And then if you use the discount code OCI Neighbor, you get 25% off your ticket. So that's pretty much it.
All right, so here we are with our presentation, and we're going to bring up our a staff person of ours, Molly Ferris.
Grateful to have the ambassadors who do kind of an array of services in the neighborhood, one of them being safety. They are constantly walking around the neighborhood, interacting with business owners, residents, kind of an effort that we've recently in our neighborhood, public realm and beautification, so they make sure that it's clean in the area, and snow removal. So some of the services that they provide, here is a snapshot in 2020. Role is promoting this. It's been very interesting to see that a lot of people don't really know what the ambassadors do that aren't in the neighborhood as often as our residents or maybe our business owners. So exciting to kind of spread that word and also be a part of the overall safety program in Ohio City. And with that, I will pass it over to Tila Patterson.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. My name is Tila Patterson. I'm the Community Engagement and Equity Fellow here at OCI. I came on to develop a neighborhood safety program. But when I got here, as my name suggests, the equity piece, I realized that there was an imbalance. You can. Thank you. Can you hear me now? Okay. I realized that there was an imbalance in the community engagement here. And so here's how things go. We wanted to address the root causes of crime and violence. And so here's an abstract that I found online that talks about how crime is a result of social and environmental factors and not biological factors. I won't read the whole abstract, but ultimately it talks about how our social conditions, how our proximity to violence, our history with violence, and things of those natures play into our capacity and where we end up living. And so through the development and implementation of community building and neighborhood safety programs, we look to reduce violence and crime while building a more diverse and inclusive community. So as you can see on the map, that's Riverview. That's on 25th. To the left, there's a map. We have a program in Lakeview Terrace. That's the high-rise CMHA building. Near the West Side Market is the Riverview Towers that you see in the photo. And then right at the border of Ohio City on Detroit at Garrett Morgan High School. So that community building and neighborhood safety looked like addressing the fact that Riverview residents, some of our residents felt like they wanted to fit into the Ohio City community. So there was some issues around belonging. And so we developed the leg of this program to empower residents to establish an autonomous resident group like all of our other resident groups in Ohio City. This will enable them to establish a clean and safe environment free from severe violence, criminal mischief, pestilence, and despair. And because this was a senior building, we wanted to have a more senior outreach and engagement sort of programming going there. So at Garrett Morgan High School, we launched the Community Building and Crochet Club. Our goals here were to empower high school students to cultivate a community while developing an income earning life skill and addressing additional risk factors and taking action to mitigate environmental injustice. So there are also environmental initiatives that we have. And lastly, there was the tree planting event. So that looked like youth and family engagement in the Lakeview housing, public housing. We are going to educate and engage youth and families in art, gun violence prevention, and tree stewardship. So that looks like on April 22nd, we'll have a tree planting and stewardship where we will plant trees to buffer the Ontario stone industry where there's air quality issues, and so they'll be a part of that. We'll talk about the root causes of violence, we'll make seed papers, and we'll plant some trees. And so this looks like not me, but we, the power of community. When you come together for a good cause, you can have a intergenerational, multicultural, diverse group of people coming together. And so here is the last couple photos. Here's Garrett Morgan. This was launched. This was a couple months ago. I will update this again because the story has been unfolding. But here are students at Garrett Morgan enjoying their crochet. And you can see on the video here, Tyshawn, the young man in the gray hoodie to the far left. That's him. The first day after crochet, he stopped by a store on his way home and brought some yarn and a crochet hook, and he sent this video in. So he went home and started crocheting that day. We also have conversations around what causes violence. Ultimately, there are reasons why we're social-emotional related. So that was actually amazing research. I didn't intend to make this so research-oriented, but the students are very wise and they provide a lot of amazing feedback. So the train has left the station. That is the community building train. We've started the Garrett Morgan Community and Crochet Club. We'll have the tree planting and stewardship starting shortly after that. Today we did a presentation here at Urban Community School because they will be volunteering in our effort with the tree planting and cleanup. So thank you for hearing about our programs, and I hope you come back to hear the rest at the end.
Thank you, Tila. So I realize as my name is on this screen, I did not introduce myself at the very beginning, so I apologize. My name is Whitney Long-Jones, and I'm the Director of Community Engagement at Ohio City Incorporated. So as I was saying earlier, we realized that people have a major concern and interest around improving safety, and what does that really mean? We want to get to the root of understanding as a unit, as a community, how to define safety and security. So there's a couple focus areas, and Lieutenant Beckner, you were asking me for this information. What areas do we really want to focus on so we can start to define that as a unit? Because when we think of security, when we think of safety, that's vast and broad, and it could mean anything. Everyone has their own perspective, their own lived experiences, and I think having conversations again as a community is really important to make sure we're all on the same page. So information that we pulled from NeoCanDo, a index that Case Western Reserve puts together, does the research on, and provides this data, this information, and this is based in Ohio City. And I also want to acknowledge something that Lieutenant Beckner said to me maybe a week ago, that all the data that we have only goes up to 2022. And even though crime is real, our own perceptions of safety are real, the rates have been going up as of 2023. So we want to make sure we're acknowledging that. How can we make sure we are sticking with that and improving safety, again, as a community? I can't say it enough times. So violent crimes, burglaries, auto thefts, and robberies are the 4 areas that we would like to focus on in this neighborhood. And this information and these topics came specifically from our Community Engagement Committee. So this is not Ohio City Inc. saying, this is what we're doing, this is what we're leading. This is feedback that we've gotten from speaking to folks for the last more than 6 months now and have helped to develop the groundwork for the neighborhood safety program. So the main goals, of course, are reducing crime and improving safety, empowering a resident-led committee to guide the process, again, working with you all, making meaningful connections with law enforcement, and here we are starting that process with the individuals who are represented on this panel today, providing sensitivity and trauma-informed care training, so acknowledging our own implicit biases. Again, everyone has their own perception and lived experiences when it comes to the topic of safety, so how can we get on the same page and come together to define that as a community? And then developing a sustainable model, either so that we can make sure we are continuing the work or sharing it with other communities that may also be experiencing the same concerns. So for this year, we are doing a whole process around engagement. So community surveys, facilitating stakeholder focus groups. We want to, in the very near future, identify residents so that they can help lead this process and compensate them for their time. And then community safety audits, which we plan to do in the summer once we have a little bit more information and some professional insight to help guide that process as well. So here is the breakdown of when we will be doing these focus groups. Everyone on the panel, I'm hoping that you will participate because we do have government officials and law enforcement in May. So being honest, this process has been a little bit more daunting than one may realize. So we are a month or two behind where we would like to be. So we have started doing resident stakeholder focus groups this month. Next month we're going to focus on social service agencies and so on and so forth, kind of spreading it out a little bit so we make sure we spend the proper amount of time gathering this information. So Talk of the Town, this is a Talk of the Town today. We did these community conversations before COVID, and this is the first one since COVID. So bringing this back, this is a little bit different than our monthly community meeting where Ohio City Inc. shares information, provides community updates, brings developers in to talk about projects that are happening, whereas these Talks of the Town are more around topics of interest for residents, for community stakeholders. And again, safety has been an ongoing conversation, so we figure the Talk of the Town topics for this year will be all based on safety and developing this neighborhood safety program. So we want to really look at what the impact of developing a program like this is. What are the outcomes? What's the process that we're going to go through to make sure that we're meeting measurable goals? So again, I had a conversation with Lieutenant Beckner, and he's providing so much insight and saying, like, what does a 10% decrease in crime mean? How do you plan to achieve that? How are we defining that? If we're looking at, for instance, calls for service, and I'm taking this straight from you, Lieutenant Beckner, so hopefully you'll talk on it a little bit later. If we look at calls for service, say we redirect someone to call into the police that's a non-life-threatening emergency, maybe someone's having a mental health crisis, and more people are calling instead of calling that resource instead of making an emergency call. Now we see an increase in calls for service, which goes against our goal of decreasing calls for service. If I'm saying that correctly, does that make sense? So again, just making sure that we have clear, measurable goals and understand what it is that we're working to achieve here. So I am going to pass the mic to our moderator, Shauna Sanders, and so we can begin the panel. So Shauna Sanders is the Executive Director of Slavic Village Development Corporation. She was very recently formerly the Executive Director of Malachi Center here in Ohio City, and she was also a board member of Ohio City Incorporated. So I think I just want to throw this out here. Shauna has a wealth of knowledge when it comes to social service and community, and I'm honored to have her moderate this panel because it adds a perspective that, along with our law enforcement agents and our representative from the Cleveland Police Commission, and this is not an insult to you all, This is more on the ground and working face to face on a daily basis with individuals who have mental health conditions or, substance abuse issues. So, Shauna, I'm going to give you this mic, and gentlemen, there are 2 more mics on the table, and I'll let Shauna introduce our panelists, and we'll go from there.
Thank you. If nobody minds, I'll just sit down so we'll stay really informal. And I have to say this piece of it. On my time at Ohio City Incorporated, I was in the Community Engagement Committee because we can't not fail. I still say my kids. So when I talk about my kids and my family, the families and the participants at Malachi Center, they were highly impacted by, the critical areas that we talked about up there. And I'll have to say, especially the Cleveland Police Department, and then even in some areas, Lutheran's staff has helped me and my families and multiple times getting, not just when there's a critical incident, but getting participants to where they need to be. Because sometimes service does not look like someone being detained. It may look like someone being serviced. So I have to say that. So I am going to introduce the panel, and starting at my far right is Lieutenant Stephen Beckner. And then we have, and I'm going to use my cheat sheet, Sergeant Eric Smith. And I'm sorry, Lieutenant Beckner is from the Cleveland Police Department, and Sergeant Smith is from the Cleveland Clinic Police Department at Lutheran Hospital. And we have Chief Andres Gonzalez, who is the Cuyahoga Metropolitan Housing Authority Police Department. And we have Commissioner Pete Van Leer, who is with the Cleveland Community Police Commission. So we're going to discuss some topics, and I'm going to ask that the panelists will start with a question, and you can expound however you feel comfortable. And I don't know if there's someone who wanted to volunteer to start. No, everybody's okay. You're okay. All right. Lieutenant Beckner, you're looking at me, so I'm going to say your name first. Okay. And one of the things that I have to say before we start, I have to give kudos to Whitney, because this is about the intersection of how policing agencies are interdependent and work with each other. Because most of us don't really understand the different agencies that are at the table. So as you have questions and everything, please feel free to write them down and even get into the weeds of.
Can you hear me? Okay, I'm sorry. So I'll say it again. Lutheran is like the second East Ohio. Outside of what we used to have was right on Carnegie, St. Vincent's, but they closed down. So now most of your psych patients are coming to Lutheran now. So Cleveland, CMHA, they may bring in psych patients along with their help. We get them in there. We have three floors of psych. Since I've been there like 7 years now. Mental health is really rising. In this community, it has risen tremendously since I've been here with psych in the home. So having these guys come in and the partnership with Cleveland and CMHA, it's been a great help. Since Vincent's has closed, it has been immaculate. So I want to say thanks to Cleveland and the CMHA for helping us out when they bring these patients in. As far as escorting, it's a different type of escort when you're dealing with psych patients, mentally ill patients. You're not there to arrest. You're there to help. So you're trying your best not to hurt anyone or arrest. You're trying to help. So it's a different type of doing crime out in the streets so far as doing inside the hospital. So if you got any questions about mental health, Lutheran is a great place to start.
I have to say that was my experience. Like very calm, very not inciting anything, just getting participants to where they need to be. But yeah, one of the questions that I have for Chief Gonzalez and being a director at Maliki Center, we did a lot. Most of our families did come from Lakeview Terrace, and so I just specifically focusing on Lakeview Terrace and Riverside. Like, what are your experience of safety? Where would you say we are now? What do you think is important for people to know, especially since we have a commissioner, CMHA commissioner here? You know, what do you think is important for residents to know about your experience and what they need to know?
Well, good evening, everybody. My name is Andy Gonzalez. Thank you for the introduction. Thank you for the invite. We do have two significant properties that are stakeholders within the Ohio City boundaries. One of them is, as you mentioned, Lakeview Tower, Lakeview Family Estates. It's actually two components to that, along with Riverview High Rise. So a little bit of history so that we can understand our role in our neighborhood in the city of Cleveland. So we all know the Commissioner, Diane Howard. She's one of my bosses. So I have to publicly acknowledge her here this evening, along with Ms. Helen Smith, who I love dearly and I've spent a lot of time. I grew up as a police officer, probably under her tutelage, so it's good to see you. Also, Councilwoman, always good to see you. But CMHA is 90 years old. We just completed 90 years of existence of being the oldest public housing authority in the United States. It's the first public housing authority in the United States. We are currently the 8th largest housing authority in the United States. The first one, as we can imagine, would be New York City. I am a product of the projects in New York City, a small place called the Bronx. New York City is the highest, is the largest housing with over 385,000 units. Who could think would be the second largest housing authority? It's a little bit tricky. Second largest housing authority is Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico has the second largest housing authority with over 180,000 units. CMHA, we rank about number 8 or number 9, depending on who's doing the talking and who's doing the advocating. So with us, we are currently serving 55,000 residents through 2 or 3 different programs within the housing authority. One is the low-income public housing, which a lot of people recognize as the projects, right? We have 60 developments that we classify under those, and within those 60 developments, we probably have upwards of 25 to 26,000 residents. The other side of CMHA is the voucher program, where an individual, depending on the qualifications under the guidelines, they would receive a voucher we have to classify, well, is it the 1745 side or is it the 1795 side? Each of those sides have roughly 250 units, so you can imagine with two people living in a household in those apartments, and they are one-bedroom studio apartments, roughly 1,100 residents that we have there. That keeps us pretty busy. The sergeant is actually very, very accurate in his statement. Many of our residents that live in Riverview, and I say this fondly and I say this lovingly, they are individuals with a high level of social need. They have a lot of social service requirements. And unfortunately, there's a significant amount of mental illness that we have to deal with. As a police department, we have to interact with our residents, the commissioner knows this, and we have to interact with them in an individual way. We can't just compartmentalize and throw everybody into one big giant bucket. The men and women that work under my command at the CMHA Police Department really strive to provide individual police services so that we're actually trying to meet the need of these individuals that are calling us. So you heard the sergeant say he's actually very, very correct. St. Vincent's Charity Hospital was a large provider of mental health services, not only for the CMHA Police Department, but for all other police departments within our geographic, with the surrounding neighborhoods, the city of Cleveland, and all the suburbs. They shut down. When they shut down, they still have a wing dedicated to mental illness or psychiatric evaluations. But the bulk of those patients, a lot of those patients that would end up at Charity Hospital are now going over to Lutheran Hospital. So what we want to understand, and what I would like to explain a little bit behind the scenes, is what actually happens in what we call a crisis intervention. In other words, what happens when we respond to an individual that is exhibiting some kind of mental illness or some kind of mental anxiety or whatever the case may be. The first thing I'd like us to know, again, in response to how we handle things, whether it be in Lakeview and at Riverview, is we do not take them to jail. We do not take a person that is exhibiting mental stress or mental illness or a mental issue. We do not take them to jail. We learned a long time ago, taking them to jail, individual, is the worst thing that could happen. So we don't do that. Instead, what we do is we initiate what we refer to as a crisis intervention, which means that we try to understand, we try to de-escalate the situation, we try to ask specific questions to get a better understanding as to what is going on with the individual or within the household, and then based on that information, 9 times out of 10, we take that person to get a psychiatric evaluation. Now, what happens? When we take an individual in for a psychiatric evaluation in the Sergeant Shop, or specifically a Lutheran hospital, the patient does not stay for a long time. I want to be very clear. This is the challenge that we are all facing. We seem to believe sometimes, I go to a meeting that says that if the police officers takes a person and takes them to the hospital for psychiatric evaluation, that they're going to be in the hospital for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 days. That doesn't happen. The average time that a patient that we take in for a crisis intervention spends in the hospital is roughly 4 hours to 8 hours. Typically within 24 hours, that person is released. Now here's the issue, and it's the issue that is impacting Ohio City, and not only Ohio City, but a lot of other neighborhoods. When that person is released from the medical facility, the medical facility may provide them with a bus pass or may provide for some form of transportation so that they can get back home. If they live in Riverview, if they live at Lakeview, it's simple, right? You drive right down the street to Lakeview, you go across the street to Riverview, and But what happens when the patient does not live in the immediate area that provide for transportation? So sometimes they will take that voucher, they'll take the bus ticket, they'll take whatever means of transportation or the opportunity, and they won't get on it. They won't get on the bus. Or they refuse transportation and decide that they want to walk home. It may be a little bit of a distance. But again, remember, this individual got to this facility for a reason. When they start walking and they don't avail themselves of the services that we as a community are trying to provide them, they start meandering through the neighborhood. And oftentimes, we now start getting these repeat calls for service that you were referencing with me, these repeat calls for service for the same thing over and over again. And so if we spend 2 or 3 hours here tonight, and 3 departments will develop a list of individuals that are known to us and that we have frequently contact, I would garner to bet that we're going to have common names on that list. So that's one thing I want us to understand, okay, how we deal with a crisis intervention and the truth behind what happens when we take a person in for a psychiatric evaluation. I talked a little bit about Riverview High Rise, 500 units. Over at Lakeview, in the neighborhood where Commissioner Howard lives, at Lakeview High Rise, at Lakeview Tower, which we call it, is about 260 units and probably about 400, 450 residents living inside that high rise. Surrounding that high rise is what we call the estates. Now this is where it starts getting a little bit more complex. When we start getting into the estates, this is actually where the families live. So collectively, throughout Lakeview Estates, we probably have another 300 to 350 units of family estates. Now, at the high rise, it's simple, right? It's either 1 or 2 people living in an apartment at a high rise. When we get into the family estates, typically it's a single woman, head of household, that typically has, on average, about 3, maybe 4 children that are dependent, that have to live inside these estates. And so, because of the family component in there, most times there is a male absent. But however, when I say absent, they're not on the lease per se, so we don't count them as an actual tenant. But inevitably, there is someone in the house, right, that to complete the male, female, and the kids. And then, of course, when you have a family together, then you have family issues. It's no different than living in any other neighborhood in the city of Cleveland. Just because they live in public housing, and just because it's low income and it's subsidized housing, it does not mean that our residents cause trouble. They do not. I can tell you, after 17 years, it's been 17 years since I've been at CMHA, my experience has indicated that the #1 perpetrator of crime and disturbances on CMHA property are outsiders, are individuals that do not live on CMHA properties. That's a whole discussion for another day. I'm going to cut it short there, but thank you again for allowing me to speak, and thank you again for the invitation.
Once we get into our discussion later, I mean, I think that's a very valid point. I dealt with many residents, and I do think it's, there are people who do what they do there and then go home. So we're getting to Commissioner Van Leer. I do have the question of how you engage the community, but I think that some people probably a community police commission. Can you tell us a little bit more about what that is and how that commission interacts with other agencies and then engaging, the community at large? I think.
I just talked loud, so let me know if you can hear me. But All right, is that better? All right, so I have to shout as much. So yeah, the Police Commission, there is a history. First of all, I want to say I'm not only a commissioner, but I'm a resident of the neighborhood. I've been here for a long time. I walked over here from my house on 45th, so I'm part of this community for a long time. So the Police Commission got its start. It's gone through a couple of different phases, you could say. So many of you probably know about the consent decree that the Cleveland Police Department is under. In 2014, the U.S. Department of Justice was doing an investigation of the Cleveland Police for a number of reasons. A lot of there have been shootings of residents of Cleveland, and in 2015 they came to an agreement with the city called the consent decree or a settlement agreement. And part of that, a lot of that was like they had to really, there was excessive pattern of excessive force and operations within the police department that were leading to that and were part of that problem. So there's a lot of reforms that have needed to happen. And one of the pieces that was created back in 2015 was the Community Police Commission. At the time, it was different. It had more of an advisory recommendation role. They were doing studies, and it was really about, still, it was a similar mission about providing community oversight, community input, community engagement, but it didn't quite have the same oversight powers as it does now. They put out a lot of reports around policing, and they, one of our staff people, Shelley Williams, is here, who's done a lot of the community engagement, and she would be better to talk about that history and our role there, but that is a big part of what we have done and continue to do. So in 2021, many of you would remember there was issue 24. And that was put before the voters, and it more than almost 60% of Cleveland voters said yes to issue 24. And so that was more than 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago. And part of that gave the Community Police Commission and some other oversight entities more power and sort of separated the Police Commission, at least, from the consent decree. So before 2021, when the consent decree ends, assuming that happens at some point, the commission would have gone away. But now we've been created outside of that consent decree, outside of that agreement between the U.S. Department of Justice and the City of Cleveland, and we have final authority over a number of issues related to the Cleveland Police Department. So, and I'm talking specifically about the Division of Police in Cleveland and not the other law enforcement agencies represented here today. So we have final authority over police policies around recruitment. We have discipline and accountability authority. So if there is an issue that comes up through a process that includes the Civilian Police Review Board, for example, and the person who's made the complaint isn't satisfied, that case can come to the Police Commission for a final decision. We've been in place now for about a year. My colleagues and I were sworn in December of 2023. December of 2022, sorry. And so we were sworn in that December. We basically started working in January of 2024. If anybody's paying attention, it hasn't necessarily been the smoothest ride. We've been getting to know each other in a public setting and trying to work together. And so that's been bumpy, but we've gotten a lot of work done in the meantime. So we've continued to do a lot of community work, community engagement work. I'm part of oversight of general police orders and police policy in general. And we've been working over the past couple months, especially very closely with folks at the division, colleagues of Lieutenant Beckner's, looking at general police orders that really govern how police officers work in the city, right? For example, a current one that we're working on is the ShotSpotter policy. How does that work? Is it constitutional? How do we make sure it's constitutional? And the ShotSpotter, if you don't know, it's a gunshot detection system where they have microphones around different neighborhoods, different police districts, and when a shot is fired, there's a way to detect if that's actually a shot. So anyway, that's just an example of the kind of policies we oversee. And again, training, discipline, recruiting, all those kinds of things now fall under our purview, and we try to work closely with the police on those issues. So I would say that that's a general overview. The other piece that I think is really relevant is our grant-making powers. So with issue 24, another piece that was made part of our role was to give out about $1 million a year right now in grants. So in this speaks to our overarching mission that I think is relevant for a neighborhood safety program, is that we have this grant making power. We get $1 million violence prevention. We redistribute it into the community. So the 3 areas that we can make grants in are restorative justice, community mediation, and who's part of the restorative justice network in Cleveland. If we have good community mediation programs, if we have people out in the community thinking about ways to reduce violence and prevent violence from happening, we gave out 26 grants this past year. We awarded 26 grants. We had more than 90 people apply. I think it was like $4.5 million of requests, and we had to narrow that down. So that's really a big part of, I think, the kind of thing we're talking about tonight is how do you establish neighborhood safety? And so that's the commission. I think I would want to say one other thing is that in my day job, I also do a lot of work around advocating around criminal legal system reforms. And one of the things that's particularly relevant for this neighborhood, or at least part of this neighborhood, the part I live in 44102, is that the city of Cleveland is working with the Adams Board, with the county, and Frontline Service, and social service agency in Cleveland that's involved with the co-responder program, which sends social workers out with police officers to stand up a non-police response system for mental and behavioral health people experiencing mental and behavioral health crises. So that is supposed to be starting by the end of the year. It's in planning phases right now. There was actually a neighborhood engagement piece on that recently, and I'm blanking. It was over, I can't remember where it was, but I was at it. It was at, I was thinking it was here, because I come here so often for different things, but it was not here. So that idea is to send out a clinician, like a social worker or a mental health clinician, and a peer responder who's been trained to help people who comes from the neighborhoods that are being served, to help people if they're having a crisis. And we've already heard some of that from the other panelists about what happens when people are in crisis. And we know that police can and should be trained to help folks like that as well. But in this case, there are many cases where there are not violent situations where non-police response might be the best. And the goal is to keep people out of jail, keep them out of the hospital when they're not going to be helped, and to really connect them to services that will help them as opposed to get them enmeshed in the criminal legal system, get them booked into jail, whatever. So that's another piece. And when I say 44102, the pilot area, one of the 2 pilot areas in the city is 44102. So hopefully by the end of the year, there will be this response for people. And the number that will be used for that is 998, which is the mental health call line, which is not the police line, but the mental health line. Eventually, we'd like to see it as a call that goes to 911 can be triaged for if it's not violent, and if it's the kind of call that doesn't really need a police response, that could go from 911 to this, what we're calling care response. It's happening in other cities like Cincinnati. Dayton has a mediation unit that goes out and helps with that. St. Petersburg, Florida has a similar situation where they send out civilian responders, community responders, who could help people who just might have an issue with their neighbor, might have a mental health issue, where the police then can focus on where there is a need for an armed response, where something does need that police presence. So I could say a lot more about that, but hopefully that gives you a sense, not only of the commission, but also some ideas around how to think about neighborhood safety. And I would say that OCI folks talked about the ambassador program, and that's an example of a non-police response. You have people out on the street who are helping people who might not have housing, or who even have their car breaks down, or what have you. And like, how can we be more present? How can we have civilians more present to help each other in a community like this one?
Thank you. And so once we get into neighborhood and safety, I think it's important for us to, first of all, realize that as much as we're thankful for everyone sitting at this table, it's not just, neighborhood safety is not just a policing issue. And I think we've said, probably beat that horse to death, but I don't think you can say it enough. And so just trying to get to a point where residents feel comfortable, that we mitigate the barriers between policing and where residents are. I think you start with the interfacing and questions. And so I am looking to Ms. Whitney because we are going to start our Q&A portion, and I'm not, she's going to tell us what we're going to do.
Thank you, Shauna. And thank you for everyone on the panel. That is very crucial information. So what we want to do now, let me explain everything that's on your table. Our panelists are going to join your tables. Instead of an open Q&A, we're going to have them come to you and have more of a discussion type setting. And then we're going to rotate, the panelists are going to rotate every 7 or 8 minutes or so, just so we can be out of here by 7:30, which is the time that, you know, we allotted this event for. So I want to be respectful of that. So what you have on your tables are paper, a marker, so that someone from your tables can jot down a little note. So we'll need one person to volunteer to scribe. There are also paper surveys for the neighborhood safety program. We want your perspective on what safety means to you or what you would like to see come from this neighborhood safety program. There are also QR codes, so if you want to take the survey virtually, you can do that as well. And then there's another QR code that summarizes the neighborhood safety program. So I think that's everything that's on there. There's also a paper summary if you want to take the paper. So trying to be inclusive for any digital barriers that may exist for anyone. So let's go ahead and do that now. So if our panelists can just choose a table, I will notify you when it's time to rotate. And please, if one person could volunteer to scribe, take a few notes. I like to call it speed meeting.